Morning, everybody. So we're going to give a talk from the University of Cambridge today. It's called Less is More, Streamlining 500 Diverse University Websites onto One Central Platform. It's an ongoing project of ours. So, an overview, we're going to talk about transforming a decentralized and inconsistent web estate that we have in the University of Cambridge, and how we empowered non-Drupal developers, which may interest some of you who may not be working with Drupal every day, and how you bring them on board. We're going to look at scaling and how ruthless prioritization helps us to migrate 500 plus websites. So we're going to talk about strategy, some decisions, and turning complexity into coherence. Some key takeaways that we find interesting are going to be some honest insights into the challenges of large organizations, how we resolve some directional uncertainties as things change, you come across blockers, and we're going to look into how a value-driven approach works, keeping things lean, and then the solid foundations that really enabled us to scale.
So who are we? So I'm Laura Waldoch. I'm a Drupal developer, been at the University of Cambridge for about 20 years now, but only part of the central web team for 2 years. Before that I worked at the University Library and the Faculty of Law.
And I'm Paul McCrodden. I'm an ex-Drupal developer, so I worked with Drupal for 8 years, mostly in the D6 to D8 era of Drupal. I've been a product manager since for 8 years, and I've worked in various industries like telecoms, charity, tech, green tech, and now in the university. I've taught Shivam Yoga for 13 years. I've lived in Japan for 7 years, and I'm interested in holistic design and permaculture.
So first of all, we wanted to give you a bit of an insight into the history of Cambridge and the project that we had. So obviously the university's been around for a very long time, over 800 years, and it's a world-class institution with up there in the top few in the world. But it's very, very decentralized. In terms of there's not that much central control over all the different departments, and even the colleges that make up the university are separate legal entities from the university, so they're really not under our control at all. University of Cambridge has had a website since 1997, so we've got all the different looks and feels we've had up to now. We particularly like the blue one that's second.
Funky blue. That's a winner.
Funky blue.
Yeah.
But down here is where we are today.
Yeah, the Drupal 7 site being at the bottom. So just a bit of history then on the project itself. 500 websites on Drupal 7. They started being developed around 2012. There are about 1,000 other non-Drupal sites on the university domain. We're not going to talk about those today. We're going to focus on the Drupal ones. Basically this, you could call it a platform, but essentially it was a site-by-site kind of endeavor, and new features were developed on a site-by-site basis, which contributes to our challenge, our diversity, as things evolved organically over time. So our main challenge then is to do with the service offering itself. As we all know, Drupal 7 security support ended quite a long time ago now. That's January 5th, 2025. We have a diverse web estate of 500 plus websites on Drupal. Essentially, they're unsustainable, overly flexible, and overly permissive, and lead to a lot of inconsistencies. So this shows itself then in the UX and design now at this point in time, considering it was started in 2012, which means that now we're looking at something that's evolved organically. It's now inconsistent, it's visually dated, and it doesn't have a good user experience at this point. The theme is obviously feeling outdated from Drupal 7 era, and it has various accessibility problems, a lot due to the over-flexibility of the system. The templates now at this point, they don't really meet the user needs.
And we also have a massive problem around governance of our websites. So typically the head of an institution or the head of a project will want to have a website for themselves, for their project, but they don't really want to maintain it themselves. They don't really want the responsibility. So they pass it on to a web editor to make all the changes for them. And often that web editor, it's just a tiny little part of their job. So say they'll be the librarian and web editor, or the receptionist and web editor. So they have little time to invest in improving the site, because maybe it's only 5% of their job. And content just generally tends to get out of date. Also, because they don't own the content, it's quite difficult to make any changes without authorization from the person who owns the content. So they can't really, even if they think maybe this site should be deleted, they don't really have the authority to do that. So keeping everything exactly as is the easiest option. And also, again, because they're not web editors or by profession, they just lack the expertise often. So maybe the content is a bit too wordy for the web. Maybe they just don't know how to write accessible content and keep it accessible. And then because we've got so many of these sites around the university, inevitably there's lots of duplicate content, which is not very good for SEO.
Yeah, and that really leads itself even further. When roles change, people leave, and people are uncertain about who owns what and if they have authority to change someone else's work. So what ends up happening then is we've got a problem. We have Drupal 7 end of life is long past, and we're now looking at persisting the status quo not being a viable option cost-wise, and even if so, it's not showcasing the university to be the world leader that it should be showcased as. So then that leads us into, well, what's our goal then? Our goal is to get all of the websites on it to a secure, sustainable, accessible and future-proof platform, and one that provides a better user experience for not just the users but the web editors as well. And so that would then be befitting of a world leader in higher education.
So we decided to do something about it, and we started off a project a couple of years ago, and we had great ambitious plans. We were going to just raise the whole web estate to the ground and start again. We were going to rebuild from scratch. So we got a whole load of different disciplines together. We got a designer, obviously, but then an accessibility specialist, content specialist, and we all started working together to build components and build our ideal website. We got quite a long way into that build, and we even started user testing. But it was just too slow. It was just taking too long. People were very focused on their individual specialisms, and a lot of perfectionism kind of crept into it. There was contradictory advice coming from all over the place. One person wanted to do one thing, one person wanted to do something else. Meanwhile, we had all the site editors saying to us, we've got no time to rebuild our websites from scratch. And in the end, it was just this really over-ambitious plan, which just didn't really get anywhere. And we ended up with no sites built under that project.
So what ended up happening with that phase of the project is essentially it was stopped, and the project got cancelled, team disbanded, some directional uncertainties, and that leads to then a loss of trust from all angles, and morale obviously is going to hit rock bottom for a while. But not too long later, the approach was changed into a more value-driven approach, and that was the start of the recovery then. So what we were calling it was a change of strategy, which is an assisted migration. So a migration that's going to not obviously be fully automated, but as automated as possible and get you as close to the finish line per site. The security being the primary objective then, and migrating sites, but asking them just to rebuild their homepage. So a different style of homepage, and they don't have to rebuild their whole site. We're going to migrate their content, but let's rebuild the homepage and make it look, like a future-proof modern website. Reduce the scope drastically, and identify a target pilot site, something that we can deliver so that we don't end up in the same situation of nothing delivered after a while. And to do so, we built a primarily remote product team with the skill set that we needed to achieve our goals. So, and how we did that then is we split the 500 sites. We looked at the data, basically, did a data exercise, split the sites up, and obviously in Drupal, what's common, what do we know that's going to be a clear differentiator, and that was the content types. So we looked at the content types and looked at what of these 500 sites have we got, and what's the simplest site that we could start with? Well, it's sites with just basic pages. They don't have anything really else, just basic pages. And so on, as you can see going along. We had a download content type at the time, and then a news, events, people profiles, web forms. And then on the bottom you can see migration unblocked. So if we deliver this feature, this content type, what sites are we going to unblock and be able to migrate? So we split it up in that way. As you can see, if we just download basic pages, 20 of those 500 sites we can migrate. So we started with a pilot, and then we went to start attacking this 20. And then you can see that we split them up into subtracks. So we started with one pilot site, and then we had another subtrack of 3, and we started small and trying to scale it. So you can see with the news one as an example of how we split them into subtracks, 15 roughly in each subtrack. And there's patterns even within those tracks then. And the pattern, for example, in the news case is 15 sites that have less than 15 news articles. Let's migrate those first, and because they're going to be less risk, and they don't need pages of news listings. We don't need a pagination component, for example, so we can build that later. And we just look at what we need to deliver to unblock migration. So the next subtrack then was news of more than 15 on a site, and they obviously then start to need pages, because you've over, say, 20, you're going to have pages of news. So we needed a pagination component at that point, so we could deliver that to unblock 15 more. And then the last subtrack, they needed news on their homepage. They're sites that had a news component on their homepage, so we could build a news component then to showcase their news on their new homepage, and then unblock those sites. So that's just an example of those tracks, and then so on all the way up to web forms.
So when we restarted the project, we decided to start with really solid, agile foundations. So we delivered the pilot site, which was just one nice, simple site with a really helpful site owner, handful of sites. And then we saw how that went, and then we started scaling up from there. So we're now up to, we can migrate about 25 sites per sub-track. We think we can probably scale up even more than that when we get to that point, so that's really good. We made sure that we built migration break sprints in. So although our primary focus is migration, we wanted to give ourselves time to develop the features we needed to. So typically we'll do a couple of tracks and then just have a break of a couple of weeks when we're not migrating anything. But in doing this approach, we've really had to say no to unique features and any nice-to-have features that we'd really love to build, but they just won't help us migrate, so we just don't build them. We also make sure as a team we all get together every couple of weeks and have regular retros, so we really talk about the pain points, what went well in the sprint, what didn't go well in the sprint, and then we kind of pool all our expertise and knowledge and come up with solutions to those problems. And it's really helped us refine the process and make it go much better. We also make sure that we take any opportunities that arise. So obviously our default is that we will migrate people's site, but if they come to us and say, actually, we just want to get rid of it, then we will facilitate them in doing that. Also, if they want to merge their site with a different one, we'll help them. And some site owners have come to us and said, look, can we just start again? So we've just given them a blank site so they can actually recreate within that. We've got a good suite of online training materials so people can just have a look asynchronously, but we've also run Rebuild Your Homepage workshops at so we migrate people's sites and then we invite them a couple of days later to this kind of workshop, and it's a very practical way that people can ask questions interactively and just build what they need to do.
And Magda runs those workshops.
And Magda runs those.
Yeah, they've been extremely helpful in migrating sites. So thank you to Magda for that. Another thing that's useful to share on this topic is that the window of migration that we have is like a sprint long. So it's like a 2-week window. We aim to give them a content freeze window of 10 working days, which maps to our 2-week sprint. So we basically get sites over the line and migrated, including their manual tasks like rebuilding their homepage within one sprint.
So we also spent some time building up the tech we need to do this. So we've managed to lean on CI to do lots of the routine stuff for us. So we use CI to run all our migrations. We use it to do any upgrades of sites we need to do, which we do every couple of weeks. And also it sets up SSO for us and rotates secret keys. So it's been a really essential tool for us. And we've got a good suite of automated tests. So they do smoke tests and accessibility tests. And those tests run every time we merge an MR, and also on release, just to double check we haven't broken stuff. And the way it's working is we're migrating existing Drupal 7 content into our new components. So for example, the body field on a basic page goes into our new text paragraph component, and the same with image fields go into image paragraph. So we've tried to meld the two approaches. But we have ended up having to have different rules for migrated content and new content. So in Drupal 7, there were lots of quite permissive text formats. And if we stripped those out completely, it would just have completely ruined people's content. So what we've had to do is say any migrated pages can have our deprecated legacy text formats, but any new pages will go into our much more restricted WYSIWYG editor. And then we're just balancing code solutions for cleaning up things. So any patterns we see that can be easily sorted, we go in and it's in our migration script, for example, to take script tags out and that kind of thing. But then we also do work with our editors and ask them to do some manual tasks for us. But overall, we're just trying to continually refine the process, continually reduce the manual work that's involved in migration. And we've done pretty well so far.
Yeah, exactly. There's a balance between like what's ideal and what we'd do if you were building a new website versus reality. And we have to find reality and do as best we can in this process. So one of the things that we've done to do so is unblocking the contribution from non-Drupal developers on our teams as well. A lot of that is in the CI work that Laura mentioned. We have great DevOps engineers that we work with, but also in the application itself. So we've unblocked the contribution from our front-end developers that know almost nothing about Drupal as well, which is I felt it was quite unique for working in a coupled Drupal environment. Like that's quite common if you're working in decoupled to have a front-end engineer in React or something like that. But in a coupled environment, allowing the use of Twig and building components without actually really touching any PHP or anything in Drupal. So this really allowed us to separate the concerns of front-end development, of component building, versus the kind of data wrangling in Drupal. So to do so, we have just as simple templates as possible, and these are easier to work with, they're easier to test. For example, we run some playwright tests on CI as well that run on MR merging and also on as a smoke testing as well. So we run some accessibility tests on the components using playwright, and we lean on Drupal's JavaScript as little as possible. Try to almost not use it. Prioritizing proper minified JavaScript. and in a progressive enhancement first kind of way. So we also leverage web components as well. We have just one web component to date, but if another one comes up that makes sense, this is an architectural pattern that we have as well. So we built our own in-house cookie consent solution that's going to scale with the university's needs and different cookie policy needs across the university, and allow it to be used outside of Drupal as well. So it's entirely JavaScript-based functionality that we use web components for at the moment, and it gets imported into Drupal. It's not a perfect world though. Our front-end engineer can get blocked occasionally, and needs to contact a Drupal developer for some questions, asking about like what the props are, what is this data, what's the format of it, and overall, if they need to manipulate data, they obviously need a Drupal engineer. So they can get blocked, but we're working on that as much as we can. But it's not perfect in Drupal yet either. There was a great talk about this in DrupalCamp Vienna, which I recommend on that URL. I know it's a bit, you might have to type it, but it's unlisted at the moment because I think Drupal Vienna haven't been fully released. So secret insight from Pierre, who is I think the maybe a core front-end lead, but it was about Drupal being a design system first, and making it so that we can turn this upside down, that we can get a front-end engineer to build a component and bring that to the back-end engineer and say, I've built this component, please make Drupal work with this, rather than the other way around where we're actually working from the Drupal dev having to get the data in place first and then give it to the front-end engineer, and there's a bit of back and forth. If we work the other way around, I think it can be more efficient, and that's what that talk is all about, making that better in Drupal.
Yeah, so we're really proud of what we've achieved so far. We've now got 100 sites live on the new Cambridge web platform. We've got a showcase site so we can see all the different components in action. And we've got 20 training sites so that when people come to Magda's training sessions, they've got a playground in which they can actually get some real-world experience on the Cambridge web platform. We deliver new releases to all the sites every 2 weeks, so all the sites get our new features and things that we develop. And so far, we've built the basic page content type, we've built news and events and all the associated components that go with them. We've got a proven, scalable migration process, which is great. And we've also got that decommission and delete process in place if people don't want to migrate their sites.
Easiest way to migrate is delete your website. But in all seriousness, a lot of these websites provide a lot of value as well. And where are we on this journey of migrating sites? Well, we're not actually at 500 yet. Spoiler for the talk, but we are at 100. And although it looks in this view of sites to migrate like that we're at the start of the journey, I think we are at least at the middle, if not further, because it's not about the number of sites, it's about all of the foundations and processes and all that kind of stuff that we have in place is going to allow us to scale now. We've already scaled, but now to just start migrating batches and batches of sites in bulk. So our deadline is December 2026. We have extended support until then, and we're going to migrate the rest. So we've done the bulk of the work. Now it's just going through the motions really to get there. So in the future then, what does that road ahead look like for this project and big projects like this in migration? Well, we've got people profiles, which is our biggest piece to unblock 150 websites. Anyone working in a university knows how important the people profiles are, the staff profiles. So after that, web forms, and we're going to deliver just basic web forms. Web forms can do a lot, and in our context, too much. So we don't want to actually give that much power, because with great power comes great responsibility and all that. So we're going to tackle the outliers. There's a lot of ones, I showed the patterns across sites and content types. There's a lot of sites that don't fit the mold, and they're kind of outliers that we need to solve at the end. We need to create more components and layouts because we really have just the bare minimum, and we're going to keep it lean until post-migration. And then we've kind of got a post-migration cleanup, limiting a lot of the WYSIWYG options further and converting a lot of this kind of blob content of just like HTML blocks of content we need to migrate and get those out of those and into components. There's also a content audit service that we are looking at, where post-migration content audit. So the better place then in the future that we're looking for is a place with fewer websites. There's so many websites and they just really need to merge those as well. But what we've found at the moment is that where we are is that the Drupal 7 is obviously a burning platform in some way. It's an extended support, but it's more effort to go through the communication around merging a website and all that than it is to actually just migrate it, which is a bit counterintuitive, but that's kind of the reality. So fewer websites, more governance. As Laura mentioned, the university has existed through being decentralised. It's kind of almost part of its nature to do its own thing and people to have autonomy. But when we're looking at the web and one single platform, we need to kind of reverse that and make things a little bit more standardised. So there's a constant interesting challenge for us. We're going to create more opportunity and value. So looking past just getting things secure, like how do you improve user experience and all that stuff that a website should be doing for its organization and for its users. But having better content oversight to reduce duplication and obviously some continuous improvement over the whole platform. So just to conclude our talk then, it was less is more, and that's been our motto, that we're solving for patterns, not for unique site needs. We're just doing just what's required and removing the unnecessary. A lot of product management is about removing features as much as delivering features. So getting rid of a feature is actually something to celebrate as well when you're dealing with this. I know it doesn't sound like that, but it should be, because you've less to maintain and less chance for bugs. So knowing your weaknesses and your strengths, leaning on our team of non-Drupal developers and Drupal developers, and all that retroing that Laura mentioned has just been crucial to continue retroing, rinse, repeat, refine, improve. And yes, that is our talk then. I'm going to open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. We are running a bit ahead of time, which is always good. So yeah, we have time for questions. Please raise your hand, and
we'll toss you a cube.
Yes, and we'll work with that. Should have had a health warning there.
So, I don't know if we had like a health and safety thing.
Yeah. This is recorded now.
We are too excited about the cube. Sorry.
Just talk to the at the top.
Talk to the blog.
Yes,
okay.
And say your name and.
Is that good? Hi, Aaron. Hi, Paul. Hi, Laura. Thanks a lot. That was really interesting. I just wanted to check, and I might have missed it in the talk. Apologies. You're migrating from 7 up to 10, 11, but you're not doing a multi-site approach. Each of these sites, these 100 sites, are separate
exactly.
code and databases.
Yeah, so exactly. So we don't use multi-site. We're going from Drupal 7 to, we're now on Drupal 11. We did start on Drupal 10. We managed to upgrade the whole platform. I think we're on 11.1, going to 11.3 next week, I think. But we use Pantheon for hosting, as I believe University of Edinburgh do as well. It doesn't support multi-site, so we are on a kind of, I think it's a single upstream. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, so we've got one upstream and it kind of feeds all the others. Everything is built from there, but they are each individual site. They all have their own databases. They all have their own code base.
So essentially, a release will push the code out to those. We have a central code base, and it pushes the actual the code out for each website.
That was my sort of follow-up, which is like, how are you introducing new components or new features? But it's from that central sort of mother code, and then that's pushing into all of the...
Exactly, yeah. So we have releases that, and in CI, we push it out to each site, yeah. We do it in kind of batches of groups of sites.
Nice, thanks.
No worries, thank you.
Any more questions?
Don't do what I did.
Oh, there you go.
Just
Just pass it over there.
Underarm, rugby one, yeah. Oh, very good.
And just make sure you talk closer to the mic. It's a bit.
I see T going.
It's all right. This feels really weird. I had a question specifically on the slide where you talked about the moment where you realised that this large undertaking, with all the different stakeholders, all the different opinions, all of the different work that's involved, and I guess you're at the point where you still haven't got any sites released. And I really like the next slide where you talked about the sort of refining the objective, reducing the scope. But I guess my question's on the sort of people side of things. Did you also have to reduce the amount of people or the stakeholders or the opinions, the voices in the room that were involved? And depending on the answer to that question, yes or no, how did you navigate that?
So let me see if I understand the question first. It's talking about how do you go from how do you reduce scope and like stop the noise basically of requesting, can I have this, can I have that? Yeah, so a big part of the project, the migration phase of the project has been communication. We have like we had monthly webinars to basically explain some of the things, the approach that we've just talked about there, about how there's tracks, like roughly when certain sites will be migrated. So basically, if you're in web forms track, you probably aren't at the point where we need to talk that much, because you're way more complex than we're able to cater for where we currently are. So basically that was a method of knowing where they are in a migration timeline versus the kind of conversations we can have with, if our platform's quite basic, we can't be thinking too far ahead, so we have to say, sorry, we're not at that point yet, and that's kind of how we made sure that we were only really looking a bit further than we are and planning that way. So there's a lot of kind of having to filter and sometimes giving vague responses where we don't know what the future will hold for that thing, but if it's a bit closer. We initially started with a now, next, later type of approach as well, where we know what now is, we can give you very detailed insights. Later, we can give you some guiding rough insights of what it's going to be like, and something that's later is often going to be, and we're not sure yet. We're way past that, and we're not sure yet point, but we were at that point at some point.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hope that helps. Thanks. Okay. Go ahead.
Next one, up there, just same row here. There's a hand before, and then we're going to go.
I don't know if this is actually making a difference. Oh, it is. This side does. Okay, fine. It was a really quick one about you talked about the smoke tests you used when you roll out the stuff. I was curious about what kind of things you have in that.
It's for you, Laura.
Yeah, so they're BHAT tests, and basically they're things that we started putting some basic ones in that we definitely didn't want to break, but also as we went through, we found the issues were arising, like with our product and our release. So we just then made sure, okay, we've got to make sure that doesn't happen again. So quite often our tests are a bit reactive as well. So we've done some basic kind of proactive, you know, can you load this page up kind of thing, can you see the menu? But for example, if we were finding that the footers weren't displaying properly, the footer blocks weren't displaying properly when people were putting in links, and when we pushed that up, that was obviously a bit of a, oh no, we've got to fix that bug. But part of fixing that bug was then putting in a test to make sure that we catch those kind of things early in an automated way. So they are quite reactive. We've got about 50 tests now that run whenever we push stuff up.
Nice, and they're pulling the front end interface as well and comparing it against what you're expecting.
Exactly.
What did you use for that? I'm just curious.
So it's BHAT. So we give it a little script. So we say, as an editor, if I'm logged in, I want to be able to see this on this page, and it's very kind of, it's written as in a human readable, as if it's a script, and then it just has failure points, and then it'll stop the whole thing and say, no, I can't see this block, you can't pass.
That's great, thanks.
And we have Playwright in running some component tests and as well in off Storybook, I believe. Lola Bot's Storybook implementation. Go ahead.
So you've been talking about migrating, but presumably your ecosystem isn't remaining static. So
Exactly.
are there new sites being created as well, or are they being on a different platform?
Yeah, great
Is that part
question.
of the same project, or is it?
Yeah, good question. So at the start, we actually held off new sites and we kind of had the door closed because our priority was security. So if our priority is security, we don't want to be taking on more sites. And the reason is because at the start, our upgrade process of rolling out releases was site by site. We had to go in and you had to go into Pantheon, click buttons, and even before clicking buttons, I think you had to run like command line, like commands to upgrade each site. And then we batched that. We actually got a one-click upgrade, so we could do it in the Pantheon UI. There was a button, you could click upgrade, and that was one site. So even then, we didn't open it because we had to click each site. And then we batched it so you could run it on the command line and batch rollout updates. So at that point, when that was stable, we were like, okay, well actually updating the sites and rolling out new releases is not really a blocker anymore. So we can actually take on new sites because updating that site is not going to impact us too much. So then we've opened the doors and now you can actually request a new site. So we do have new sites coming in along with the migrated sites. And then we're rolling out releases to all sites, migrated and new. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, brilliant. And just one other thought is, one of the problems you were talking about was sort of confusion over who owns things, and have you been trying to clear that sort of ownership status and
The governance of websites, of the web in general? Is that what your question is, around the ownership from a site owner's perspective?
Yes.
Of the site? I think that that's a long game. It has started, but I think that that's actually the technology is not the biggest challenge. I think that actually is the biggest challenge of web in the university. But yes, it's part of our vision post-migration to get that in a much healthier space.
Okay, next question. Let's go in the front row and then go back.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how big is your team?
How big is our team? Our immediate team is 4 developers. Is it? Yeah.
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 4 developers,
4 developers.
a designer,
Yeah.
and then we've got product manager and project manager as well.
And then we've got, like, in the periphery, then we've got, like, the DevOps engineer that'd be across. There's more horizontal, remember, whereas in the vertical, there's 4 developers in the
Thank
team
you.
and a designer.
Cheers. Kind of a follow-up on the ownership. Like, what's the... Because I guess you're trying to build also something centralized. Is there an approach as well around permissions, roles? Who's dealing with what? Who's giving permissions? Like, how do you deal with that? Because I guess the university has also those challenges of, like, who can edit, who can publish. So what's the workflow there?
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know if you didn't want to...
No, it's a good one. No, so we've gone from a place, like I mentioned at the start, where it's been overly permissive. So we've had people that were on the editor, the one that you get out of the box with Drupal, I think, is like the main administrator. And we didn't want to persist that, to give too many permissions. So we've basically just created new roles. We've got an editor, a site admin, I think we've got a contributor now, so just a few layers. And nobody on the site owner side gets the administrator permission anymore. So they've actually essentially gotten less permissions now, and there is sometimes a bit of we have to explain why you're on a platform that's much more restrictive. So complex permissions is something still further out on our roadmap, because that's been identified as like something like groups or that kind of thing, where you're or like node-based level permissions. So we haven't got to that point yet. It is on our horizon, but at the moment we have locked down permissions, and we even have, like, every release it pushes out and ensures that we don't have an administrator. If somebody's gone in, like even in the support team, if they've gone in and made somebody administrator, their permission will be wiped out next release, because we just want to always keep them on the more restricted roles.
We go back there to Billy, and then, depending on time, we might have time for one more.
Hi there, Billy Rosendale, School of Engineering, University of Edinburgh. You mentioned 1,000 websites which you didn't want to talk about, so I'm going to ask you about them. And also, you might want to talk about this later with me. You're wondering what your approach is to profiles, so you can answer them in your own way.
Yeah, nice. I think maybe you know more about the web estate more broadly, I think, Laura.
Yeah. So basically, it was like the university had an offering of a web platform that people could use, but there wasn't a mandate. Again, it comes to this governance. So some people have gone off and created their own website. Some people have created it in WordPress. We got a big department who went down the WordPress route. Some people just code them by hand in HTML. We sometimes come across that. Sometimes people use various other content management systems. And then they ask for a university, we sort the DNS out for them, so they have a university address. But that's unfortunately, that's kind of beyond our remit in this team. It is something we have to think about, because I think probably from a legal level, ultimately we are responsible because it's got an @cam.ac.uk address. But it's kind of the Wild West, people have just set it up on their own. And that's just too far for the scope of this project. In an ideal world, everyone would be on the Cambridge Web Platform, but we can't get there yet. That's just too far beyond what we're doing.
Yeah, and the people profiles, let's talk about those later, but I definitely appreciate it. Edinburgh have been great to collaborate and share what you're doing in that space, and we're running some UX testing in that space. We can share back some of how that's going, but yeah, let's talk later.
Okay, last question.
Last question. So my name is Billy. I'm the tech lead on the Edinburgh platform. It's a similar model to you. 2 questions for me. One, you'd mentioned on each release that you clear the admin rights. How do you do that?
So we've got a Drush script in place that we actually, because we run all our upgrades via CI, we can just put in a command to run that Drush script, and it will just go through. Basically, it strips out all the admin permissions and makes everyone site admins instead, which is kind of our slightly more restricted version. And then we now have a static list of like us, our team,
Who should be an admin.
The people we allow to be administrators, and then it just goes through each website and just reapplies that administrator role.
Right.
To all of us.
So you don't have a list of all the users on all the sites?
No,
it's
no,
just
no. It's literally anyone who's an administrator will be downgraded, and then we will re-add the administrator permission. But because it's all done via CI, it's not that process runs overnight, so we just wake up and it all works again.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at next. Second question, so you've said you've got 500 websites. Is this just single sites, or do you allow like sub-sites within the sites?
Single sites currently. We do have some of those, don't we, further on, but we've listed them as a complexity that we cannot support currently.
Right.
So they either need to split them back into single sites is kind of what we're pushing towards, I think, isn't it, Laura?
Yeah.
So I think, for us, from our Drupal 7 site that we migrated, it was in total 700 websites, but it was a hierarchy. And so we allowed, like, some of our sites have 100 sub-sites. So, I mean, our original plan was to give everyone a site, but as you can imagine on Pantheon, 700 websites is very expensive. So what's your plan then when you move into allowing sub-sites?
I think it's a kind of swallow the cost initially, but then, as I mentioned, with the future vision would be to start thinking, like, why is that even a separate site in the first place? Can it not live under another site? And to start thinking, is it groups? Is it actually just a landing page? In some cases, it may just be a section of a website, but it somehow is a separate site. So that's the governance challenge, I think, comes back in, where you start trying to consolidate it's a post-migration problem is one of those kind of
Yeah,
not
'cause
for now type thing.
Yeah.
For us, I mean, we had to use the groups module, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
it's caused us massive headaches.
Right, good to know. We'll talk to you about that a bit more. Yeah. I know,
Feel
we
free.
repeat the same things.
Feel free. Yeah, because I mean, for us, having 700 to 1,000 websites singular on Pantheon,
Yeah.
it's the expense. It's easy to manage, as you know, through releases, but it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks. I will
Thanks
note
a
a
lot, buddy.
sneaky second question there. So,
It was probably
thanks
about
again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.